is what I can only describe as a kind of modern crusade against what I'll call spicy content, just so this video doesn't get flagged and disappear before anyone gets to hear the point that I'm making. Because truthfully, it's not just about the content itself, it's about a much deeper conversation worth having. Now, my position isn't me saying I want everyone to take to the streets and rip off all their fabric and go crazy, thrusting far and wide, collecting them all. I'm not advocating for chaos. I still believe there's a place for class and that public behavior has boundaries. I'm not saying that I advocate for all of us being extreme heathens, but there's also something worth noticing here. When larger forces start dictating or trying to dictate to us what forms of entertainment we can watch or consume, it raises bigger questions about autonomy and control. And yes, this does directly affect me. Plenty of entertainment I and countless other men and women enjoy contains this so-called spicy content. Even in my own writing, while it's not always the main focus, intimacy still finds its way in because it's a part of human life. It's a part of humanity. If I'm writing about a harem, for example, that's one of my stories, I'm exploring how the men and women realistically navigate those dynamics. Suddenly, that becomes a target for censorship under those or these proposed bans. Groups like Collective Shout and others pushing this agenda would see it all as unacceptable. And I'm really proud of all the people that are speaking up about this. All my fellow girls, all the guys, are at least speaking up about this.
This has been delayed once again from May of 2026 now to September of 2026.
Planets are going to collide! You do know what that means? Sure, it's like
purge happened. They either say it happened suddenly, they either say, oh, Tumblr pulled a stupid move and suddenly don't. Tumblr purge happened because of Sesta Fosta.
I cannot believe women have to deal with this.
I can't believe you're still calling yourself pro-women. Hi, me again. I'm gonna stitch every fucking video you post. Let's talk about your founder, Melinda Tankard-Reist. The one who wrote Giving Sorrow Words, the famous anti-abortion book. The one who campaigned alongside Right to Life Australia, the anti-abortion group. The one who worked with a conservative, Christian, anti-abortion, anti-LGBTQ politician for over a decade? Or maybe you'd prefer to talk about the fact that your group protests against Drag Queen Story Hour. Protecting women? Protecting women from who exactly?
A lot of people are making the connection that the same week the Australian group Collective Shout was able to successfully censor a bunch of games on Itch.io, games and books and comics and what have you, is the same week that the Online Safety Act went into effect.
Oh, hell no. I'm about to tweak in this bitch, bruh. I'm about to start tweaking in this bitch, bruh.
That's why I keep saying the pendulum of society should never swing all the way to one extreme. Balance matters. A culture that tries to sanitize everything becomes as degenerate and unhealthy as one that indulges without limit. And people are saying that all conservatives are evil because of this. I've heard conservatives claim that all liberals are evil because of the same. But the truth is, it's not a conservative nor liberal issue. There are people on both extremes who want to censor and control everyone, from those on their own side to those on the opposite side, all the way to the people in the middle. No, this is a much bigger issue. It honestly baffles me why humans can't just settle down, have a good meal, and live on some balance, good old-fashioned, let me just eat until I'm full kind of behavior. Instead, everything has to be a smorgasbord, all day, every day. Is moderation some forgotten art? So the first thing that we'll look at is this article, which claims that the spice, as I'll call it, you know exactly what I mean, is killing our morality. Okay. It says a lawmaker in Lansing is taking on spicy content, you know what I mean, as he works hard to ban it outright in Michigan. Big Picture View says House Bill 4938, called the Anti-Corruption of Public Morals Act, would prohibit the distribution of real, animated, digitally generated, written, or auditory depictions of spicy acts. The bill outlines the types of acts covered, including intercourse and self-pleasure. Like, what in the world? The bill also includes a section targeting transgender individuals by prohibiting material that includes a disconnection between biology and gender by an individual of one biological sex imitating, depicting, or representing themselves to be of the other biological sex. Wow. So, Before I start to break down this article and the entire topic, let's take a look a little further down at what was stated by the state representative. So it says the bill's sponsor is State Representative Josh Shriver, a Republican representing Northern Oakland County, including Oxford. He is known for his controversial push to urge the Supreme Court to overturn its decision on gay marriage in February. Sorry, let me just read the article. Try to keep my emotions out of it. He claims that spicy content, I hate having to say that, but you know why I have to do that on YouTube, leads to societal decay, affects marriages, and is linked to human trafficking. This is a quote from him that they've placed here where he says, "Right now, we have a situation where you have over 90% of youth under the age of 18 who has seen spicy content. It's killing our drive, it's killing our morality, our moral, and it's something that has, or morale, I guess, or moral, it's spelled moral, and it's something that has no place in a Western civilization." The article continues by saying the bill would require internet service providers in Michigan to use filters to prevent people from accessing the prohibited material. Now, I don't know if this means that they're going to censor it in terms of just, I don't know, doing what Japan does and putting blurry boxes to obscure the acts being performed. It almost seems that that's what it's alluding to, but I don't think it just comes down to that. The article continues by stating, if the bill becomes law, violators could face prison time or hefty fines. Distributing the prohibited material or making it available online would carry a maximum prison sentence of 20 years and or a $100,000 fine. If more than 100 pieces of prohibited material are involved, the penalty increases to 25 years in prison and or a fine up to $125,000. Is this V for Vendetta? Because this is very reminiscent of that. Anyway, it continues lastly saying, additionally, an internet service provider or commercial entity could face fines for knowingly allowing people to access sexually explicit material online. The bill's sponsors are also advocating for violators of the I'm sorry, it's just so ridiculous, it's hard to read it with a straight face. For violators of the Anti-Corruption of Public Morals Act to register as sex offenders. If you're all thinking this bill sounds batshit insane, I don't blame you, because it does. And what it really even sounds like is political theater dressing up under the guise of protecting morality. So I guess the bigger question people might have is this person right? Does banning the spice protect morality, or are we worse off as a species with it? The first thing I want to point out is that spicy content isn't some new invention. It's actually much older than even our species. From the very inception of our Homo sapiens species, and even in countless others, the act of knocking pubic bones together has always been around. It's taken different forms across cultures and times, but the core reality is the same. Intimacy, desire, and the ways people choose to express it are as natural to human existence as eating, sleeping, or telling stories. Now, what I will give you is that it might be a little unnatural in the way it's applied in modern society by way of copious constant exposure and idealized illusions of what intimacy is supposed to look like, or even you could argue with the advent of social media and the internet is now one of the driving forces of why people don't feel as motivated to go out there and get the real thing, because they can get the same dopamine hit or similar dopamine hits just by staying at home and kneading the dough or flicking the beaners. Many people make the argument that it contributes to unrealistic body standards and sometimes unhealthy portrayals of boning, and in rare cases, linked to human trafficking. And mind you, I said rare cases. But outright banning it is like banning alcohol because some people get DUIs. Problems exist, but a lot of the times prohibition makes them worse, not better. And I like how none of these people ever go to the source of the problem. Education, regulation, and promoting ethical, spicy content, I believe, do far more good than blanket bans. And the thing is, we already have those things in place. Not only that, but it's unconstitutional and impractical. I mean, these are probably the same people saying that just because a few criminals utilize guns the wrong way, that everyone should not be allowed to own them and defend themselves. And they always have the argument or the retort that if they blanket ban all firearms, that's not going to stop the criminals from getting them. And I agree, but then now you want to blanket ban something like this for the few that are misusing it? The First Amendment protects sexual expression, even explicit material, unless it meets the very narrow definition of obscenity. Courts have been hashing this out for decades, by the way. There are famous cases like Stanley versus Georgia and Miller versus California. And in Miller versus California, 413 U.S. 15, 1973, the Supreme Court basically said, okay, some material can be obscene and therefore not protected, but only if it meets a very strict test. And here's the catch. Most adult material people actually consume does not meet that obscenity threshold, which means it's protected speech. As you can see down here, the annotation says primary holding. Speech that is obscene and thus lacking First Amendment protection must be without serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. It also must appeal to the prurient interest in the view of an average person according to community standards, and it must describe sexual conduct or excretory functions in an offensive way. This is a very long read that you can check out yourselves at Justia, U.S. Supreme Court, and also at oyez.org, where the facts of the case were as follows. Miller, after conducting a mass mailing campaign to advertise the sale of adult material, was convicted of violating a California statute prohibiting the distribution of obscene material. Some unwilling recipients of Miller's brochures complained to the police, initiating the legal proceedings. The question is the sale and distribution of obscene materials by mail protected under the First Amendment's freedom of speech guarantee? The conclusion is that obscene materials are not protected by the First Amendment, but the definition of obscene material is lessened. In a 5-4 decision, the court held that obscene materials did not enjoy First Amendment protection. The court modified the test for obscenity established in Roth versus United States and Memoirs versus Massachusetts, holding that the basic guidelines for the trier of fact must be A, whether the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest, B, whether the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way spicy conduct specifically defined by the applicable state law, and C, whether the work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. The court rejected the utterly without redeeming social value test of the Memoirs decision. For those that don't understand, prurient interest means would the average person using contemporary community standards say that the material is designed to appeal to spicy desire in a shameful or morbid way. Number 2, patently offensive. Does the work depict or describe adult acts in a way that's obviously offensive and that offense is clearly defined by state law? And 3, serious value. Does the work lack any serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value? This part is key. If something has artistic or narrative value, it doesn't qualify as obscene. And I don't know exactly what he was distributing, if it was just straight up, hey, look at my home videos. But if it's a book that has those elements within it, or if it's some kind of story, game, show, many of the things that we consume in terms of entertainment, those do have narrative value or artistic value. So basically, unless a work fails all 3 of these tests, it's still protected speech. That's why most adult material, books with scenes in it that are spicy, films with nudity, like in Game of Thrones and Spartacus, or art with sensual themes don't get banned. They usually have at least some artistic or narrative value. Another big one is Stanley versus Georgia in 1969, where the court ruled that people have the right to possess adult material in their own homes. As you can see here, the facts state that police suspected Stanley of illegal bookmaking. They obtained a search warrant for his home where they found 3 reels of 8mm films that were allegedly obscene. Stanley was charged with knowing possession of obscene matter, which was prohibited by state law. And then down here it says the First Amendment rights are fundamental to American society, even if the information that is received has no social value. Unwanted government intrusions into an individual's privacy violate fundamental rights, except in narrow circumstances. People should have unlimited freedom to read or view whatever material they want in the privacy of their homes. The government does not have the right to control what individuals enjoy and use to entertain themselves in private spaces. So yeah, we're allowed to possess adult material in our homes The state has no business telling consenting adults what they can use their eyes to look at in private or what they choose to enjoy in terms of entertainment, no matter how offensive it might be to people outside. And you can even connect it to the Lawrence versus Texas case in 2003, which struck down laws banning same-sex intimacy. The court said the government cannot police the private, spicy conduct of consenting adults. The same reasoning runs through all of this. Adults have autonomy over their sexual expression. So when someone comes along and says ban all spicy content, it's actually unconstitutional. And before I get into more, if you guys decide to click off the video at this point in time, I'll say this. If history has shown us anything, once you let the government censor one kind of expression, it rarely stops there. Going full scorched earth and trying to outlaw all spicy content written, drawn, painted, digital, would collapse instantly under legal challenge. They're basically asking ISPs to also become the thought police, blocking content across the entire internet, and nobody is going to be okay with that. That's technically unworkable and legally indefensible. And as we've seen going down the article, it just kept getting worse with what it claims is being said, or what this representative's trying to achieve, which he probably knows won't pass, but the very fact that he brought it up in the first place, and this isn't the first time this has happened, is an issue. He's basically saying if anyone violates the ban, if it were to get passed, should be registered as an offender. That is an absurd overreach, because you're basically equating people who make or share consensual spicy content with other adults who are consenting. Remember, this includes comics, books, whatever. You're equating them with predators and the like. You're saying that that's offensive and dangerous. Being on the SO registry ruins lives permanently. Lumping spicy actors, writers, readers, people like, oh, I read this book. I'd like you to read this book as well. It's called 50 Shades of Grey. You give it to someone, or even someone sharing a spicy erotic story into that category cheapens the registry and makes it harder to track actual real threats and predators. If you think it's a problem now, just wait, because it's only going to become a much bigger problem for actual, literal living people who exist in everyday life. And that's the part that no one seems to really think through. Even with spicy content available, we already wrestle with the issues around relationships, intercourse, human behavior, but imagine layering an even heavier burden on top of that and micromanaging every single thing that could be interpreted as spicy content. And then the real question is, where does that end? Does a love scene in a novel count? A piece of art hanging in the gallery? A photograph of people from other cultures that don't wear clothes in the way we do? A moment of intimacy in a movie that isn't even explicit, but simply alludes to desire? Maybe they have their clothes on, maybe the girl's nips are protruding and the guy has a bulge, and maybe they don't even have that. Maybe it's just like a soft form of kissing or a very intimate situation. That could be banned, apparently. Now, this may be generated, but it doesn't really matter. Regardless of what form it comes in, we have to ask these questions. There are scenes in a lot of my books, or at least one of my books, where a husband comes home, for example, from a horrible situation and takes it out on his wife in bed. He's railing the shit out of her because he's angry with her over some situation, and she's loving it. Even though they're having some marital issues, the beauty of that act and them sharing themselves with one another, both of them being mad and frustrated, and them suddenly getting together in that way, him dominating her, her loving the submission of it, it just peels away everything. And sometimes that act is used as a weapon in my book. Sometimes it's used as entertainment. Sometimes it's used as a means of escape. For me as the writer, and for the people reading my books who get to live vicariously through these characters, whether their relationships are toxic or not, it is a form of escapism for you, and you can also see it as interpretation. It is still art because it's a story being told or information that you otherwise would not have come across being introduced. Showcasing how a harem works means sometimes you have to describe what these women go through, and it's not always pleasurable. Then sometimes you just have a character staring at someone's back, completely closed off societal-wise, and they just see a little bit of skin on that person's back or the back of their neck, and they're having thoughts about them, or the girl's having thoughts about him, sees his abs. Where does it end? Because under this bill they're trying to pass, anything can constitute as spicy content. And what about the repertoire of shows like Spartacus and Game of Thrones, like I said, or movies where people are captured and it's shown how the slaves are stripped bare to reveal the rawness of it? Are those all going to be banned out of existence? If two consenting adults are swingers, or they engage in an activity where they bring in two other consenting adults, each couple is married, and they decide to watch each other, does that constitute as a crime by this law? Is that viewing spicy content? Do you get registered as an offender because of an act you're doing in your own home, recording it only for each other? What about married couples? We married people often make videos about each other, and technically that falls under this same banner. Are we now offenders because of that? If it's just for our personal enjoyment and someone bursts through our door and happens to find it, do we go to jail for 20 years? And what about minors? If a 16-year-old, curious about their body and without experience, happens upon that kind of content, whether it be in a book or video, what happens to them? Do they get 20 years too? What if they show it to someone else and they're like, bros or sis or whatever? I've seen when I was that age where girls were like, oh, look at this guy. Do we go to prison? And here's the other thing. What of the state representative himself? Jesus Christ. Sorry, gotta stay professional with them eyes though, bro. Like, people, when you are telling people to take pictures, don't do this to them. Like, if someone's taking your photograph and they take a picture, I hate those when people take pictures of people and they see people making faces like this, and they know that the face doesn't look desirable in terms of a proper photo, and they say, yep, got it, that's it, you look great. And they don't say, as a photographer, no, let's do this over. Let's take a couple more and choose the best one. Maybe you shouldn't smile then. Stuff like that. You'd think, it's very annoying. Just saying, it looks like it hurts him to smile. And I know this is not an ugly person, but the way they took his photo, they made him look like that. And this is the case because these are other images of him. He's not a bad looking guy. He's actually a decent looking guy. Look at this one. And even this one is okay. And then you have the one photographer that's like, I'm tired, I just want to take one shot and we're ready to go. Or the person who angers him before he gets his photo taken and the photographer doesn't do their due diligence. I'm sorry. I'm not a professional photographer, but I did do a lot of photography growing up, and it's just something I just don't like when they make people look like this. It's a pet peeve of mine. Anyway, but as I was saying, if you were to investigate this guy and his family members, you would find, I would bet you all my money, that you would find that he and or his family are probably huge consumers of spicy content in some form, no matter how mild or severe, or that they have done it in some way, shape, or form at some point. Do they go to jail? Do they also fall under the strict scrutiny of the very law that they're trying to make come to pass? And say you do successfully ban it, how in the hell is that going to stop predators? You'll have people who are already repressed, who already face strict punishment, and now you've stripped away absolutely any outlet for them whatsoever. I'd even argue that a ban could actually increase trafficking, which is far rarer than the vast majority of the spicy content people consume. Think about it for a second. If you outlaw it in Michigan, or worse, across the country, do you really think people just stop having those urges? Do you think they suddenly stop wanting to consume that kind of content? Of course not. And it's not like the criminals are going to respect the law either. If anything, the ban makes it more profitable because rarity always drives up demand. People with money, or just people desperate enough, will pay even more to gain access, increasing the corruption, or to see certain women in ways they normally wouldn't or are not able to do. And if the guy is Christian, which I believe he is, there are scriptures in the Bible that could be falling under the term spicy content as well. Are you gonna ban the Bible? You don't believe me? Someone was nice enough to compile these scriptures, and I did go back and check them. This might be a different translation. Sometimes they use NIV, King James Version. This looks like the King James Version or the New King James Version. Judges 16:1. Then Samson went to Gaza and saw there a harlot and went in onto her. Genesis 19:33-36. And they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father. Ugh, I remember reading that for the first time. I was like, what the fuck? Anyway, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. And it came to pass on the morrow that the firstborn said unto the younger, Behold, I lay yesternight with my father. Let us make him drink wine this night also, and go thou in and lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night also, meaning they got him drunk. And the younger arose and lay with him, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father. First of all, whoever wrote that, I don't believe that for 1 second, because women didn't have as many rights in those times, and that probably was something that the father was just like, I'm drunk, I don't know what's happening. Or he just said that to save his ass and said, I didn't get them pregnant, they drunk me, they got me drunk. I could see that happening. But anyway, here's another one. And it came to pass when Israel dwelt in the land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah his father's concubine, and Israel heard it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. Next, and Judah saw their daughter of certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took her and went in onto her, which means he fucked her. Sorry for the vulgarity, but let's just be serious here. Number 5, and Judah said unto Onan, go unto the brother's wife and marry her, raise up seed to thy brother. And Onan knew that the seed should not be his, and it came to pass when he went in onto his brother's wife that he spilled it on the ground, meaning he didn't get it and he pulled out, lest that he should give seed to his brother. 5, when Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot because she had covered her face, and he turned unto her by the way and said, go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, what wilt thou give me that thou mayest come in unto me? You know what that means. And he said, I will send thee a kid from the flock, and which means a goat probably. And she said, wilt thou give me a pledge till thou send it? And he said, what pledge shall I give you? What promise can I give you? And she said, thy signet and thy bracelets and thy staff that's in thine hand. And he gave it to her and came in unto her, meaning fucked her. And she conceived by him. It goes on and on and on. Like, there's so many of them. Here's the last one I'll read for you. You can go check it out yourself. And Ahala played the harlot when she was mine, and she doted on her lovers, on the Assyrians her neighbors, which were clothed with blue, captains and rulers, all of them desirable young men, horsemen riding upon horses. Thus she committed her whoredoms with them, meaning she fucked them, with all of them that were chosen men of Assyria, and with all on whom she doted, meaning she got ganged and she liked them and just let them all just... That's what that means. With all their idols, she defiled herself. Now, I don't know what that means, if she stuffed the idols inside of herself, or she did the god suit, whatever. Neither left she whoredoms brought from Egypt, for in her youth they lay with her. They bruised the breasts of her virginity, and poured their whoredom upon her, meaning they gang. This is the Bible. This is the same word of God gospel that the man passing these laws, or wants to have these laws passed, believes in. And honestly, like I said, I can go on and on and on. There are far more scriptures, dozens upon dozens, even stuff not listed here. I'm glad that there are already sites that compile them, because otherwise I'd still be digging through every single one myself, and that would have taken forever. But yes, this guy, as cute and innocent as he looks, is very much a Christian nationalist. Then again, he's also recently converted to Catholicism. So, make of that what you will. Anywho, what people fail to understand, and the lesson that they never seem to learn, is that the more you try to box in human expression, the more absurd and unmanageable the rules become. And regardless of what side of the aisle in any regards you belong to, the goalpost will always end up shifting. I think it's worth noting also that Shriver claims that spicy content is, tied to trafficking and marital collapse. The reality, though, trafficking is a criminal enterprise that thrives in secrecy. Banning spicy content just drives it underground, where abuse becomes harder to detect. As for addiction, the scientific consensus is still unsettled. Some people struggle with compulsive use, but it's not comparable to substance addiction. While the two are very alike, you can get addicted to anything: gambling, petting cats, running around in the street, screaming at the top of your lungs. Those issues are better addressed with therapy, not criminalizing everyone who clicks on the hub. Not everyone on the hub has an addiction. I know I've probably shared this before, but it's very embarrassing. But there was a period in time where I was just 6 hours straight, just on the hub, video to video to video to video to video to video. And then I realized, well, shit, I'm wasting my life. I don't know what I'm doing. Why is it now dark and I'm still on the hub, haven't done anything else? This is a problem. And I recognized it in myself and walked away, as has many people. If it was truly addicting, me trying to break it, it would be very hard to do so on my own, because there's a difference between chemical addiction and habitual addiction. For example, marijuana is it's not addictive, like chemically addictive, but it is habit forming. But you will be able to break off from using it and not suffer your body going into shock or any other ailments. We also know that bans don't work, and you only need to look at the Muslim majority countries where a lot of spicy content is restricted or outright banned. Take the Middle East, for example, where Islam is the dominant religion for about 90% of the population. And to paraphrase here, according to the most recent Global Slavery Index estimates, the Arab states actually have the highest prevalence of slavery per capita in the world. Just over 10 people per 1,000 are trapped in some form of labor trafficking, sex trafficking, or forced marriage. In fact, Saudi Arabia ranks 4th globally in modern-day slavery, which translates to around 1.7 million people being trafficked in the region on any given day from 2021. It is said at the moment that 52% are in labor trafficking, including commercial, you-know-what exploitation, while 48% are in forced marriages. And they're saying that's just the data that we can see, and that because of the frequent unrest and large-scale displacement, much of the exploitation in the region remains hidden. And as this website, ECPAT International, says, it's very devastating, especially for children. And like I said, in many of these regions where adult content is officially outlawed, what develops instead are these underground networks that I talked about that are far worse than the thing being banned. I mean, I've seen so many stories about women from the States and other countries being lured to these places under false pretenses so that men can do whatever they want with them and pay them money so they can drop a deuce down their throat. That's actually something that happens. And all the money that you end up getting from these men, regardless of how rich they are or not, you have to end up spending all of it because of all the sicknesses and shit that you get, eating away at your esophageal lining because you decided, or you had no choice once you realized you were down there and trapped, to swallow the logs coming out of their back doors for entertainment. So instead of open, regulated entertainment, you get all these secret Diddy-like parties, coercion, and trafficking rings where women, often recruited from other countries, like I said, under the guise of modeling or influencer work, are exploited in hidden, degrading ways like I described. With no transparency or oversight, these scenes turn into a breeding ground for abuse, showing that suppression does not eliminate human desire. It drives it into these much darker, dangerous corners. And it is extremely difficult to remove a very basic fundamental desire within every human and tell them that they cannot express or consume it. That never works out very well. When I was a Christian, I was taught or told that self-pleasing was wrong, even thinking about a guy. If I look at a dude and I say, wow, he's really hot, and I think about him in that realm at all, I just happen to notice something on him, I've already committed the sin in my mind, apparently. It's the same as doing it in person or in reality, so they try to control your mind that way. If you think about it and you're just touching yourself, that's wrong, that's gay. You know, they said stuff like sex outside of marriage was wrong. And guess what I still did a lot of? And every other Christian that I knew, literally every single one, including my own parents, at some point broke those rules, whether in their marriages or through what they consumed in movies and spicy content. Unless you're asexual, which frankly, that representative probably is, it's absurd to think that people will just be completely fine with never seeing or engaging in that kind of expression ever again. Honestly, anyone trying to make this come to pass, it seems like a you problem. If every generation has this issue that they now need to crusade for, jazz, heavy metal, video games, TikTok, people that exist outside of their political space. Now it's spicy content again. These lawmakers frame it as it being something that's destroying Western civilization, but what it really seems like, and what people are recognizing it to be, is about them enforcing their personal religious values on everyone, much like the media does when it comes to its religious political values. So this becomes law in the future, let's say, right? Erotica writers and readers, you're criminals. LGBT representation, banned outright under this bill. Sex ed, health education, risky, since written, illustrated depictions could be illegal. This creates this really chilling domino effect on art and education, and honestly, even in some medical content. If the concern is kids having access to spicy content, I understand. The real answer is, though, enforcing age verification properly. And even that is rough because there are some people that don't want to just give out their ID just to view it on these sites. I think it's stupid because you also cannot ensure that people's ID will be, or their identity will be stolen. You don't have an ironclad security on some of these sites, so I can understand. But the other thing is having an age verification, ask your age and date of birth. That should be enough. We already have those. Though kids can get around that, but kids will still find a way to get around that regardless. You can also leave explicit content out of little kids' schools unless they're at an age where they need to be educated about such matters. I agree with that. Also funding reproductive education so young people know the difference between fantasy and reality when it comes to their bodies. That would be good too. That actually addresses the problem without bulldozing free speech or expression. People, no matter what their orientation, as long as they're adults, should be free to make spicy content and conceal it or pay for it without fear of being criminalized and being put on a list when there are real actual predators out there preying on children still running rampant and free on platforms like Roblox. If you have a fly in your house, you don't burn down the entire house. Some people might argue if you have a spider, you can. But realistically, you wouldn't burn your entire house down. You look for what is attracting the fly into your house, or you look for the fly, or you open a window and try to get the fly out. You're going to burn down everyone in the house with the fly? It's ridiculous, and that's why people push back. You'll notice when it comes to human psychology, no matter what side you're on, whether it be religious or non-religious, left or right, politically, woman or man, child or adult, west or east, whenever one side tries to gain too much power over the other and dictate to them how they should live under their rules or what they find to be offensive, you will always receive intense pushback. When you prevent people from just making their own choices, so long as it isn't personally affecting you, you're taking away a fundamental part of being human. Yes, we should all look out for each other. But not everyone is going to exist under your very strict set of rules, which only line up with your personal convictions. You don't like people looking at spicy content because it offends you and your religion? Then you and your house can behave that way. But don't tell other people how they should behave based on your religion or what you find offensive. You don't like the majority of people not wanting to address you as something that you're clearly not just because you find it offensive. You and your circle of friends or your house, you can behave that way. But don't start policing other people's speech and claim how they should behave based on your own conviction or your feelings because you find it offensive. You're a woman who likes to have preferences, but you don't want men to have preferences to the point where you find it offensive if they even voice their opinions on what they find preferable in a member of the opposite sex. You keep that within your circle of people and stop trying to dictate how every man is supposed to act based on what you find personally offensive. Same thing with men. A woman wants to marry someone who probably doesn't look like her or you. She's probably never going to sleep with you, and she definitely won't now. She probably doesn't even know you because you somehow find it offensive due to you looking over into someone else's bedroom or business when you can't even get someone yourself. You're trying to dictate to her what she does with her own body and who she chooses to be intimate with, whether it be within her ethnicity or not. Mind your business. People need to recognize when something is a you problem. Let other people live their lives. Let people be human. We can talk about it and debate about it, but stop trying to take down other people and villainize people who don't agree with you just because of your own personal feelings or convictions or delusions that you have in your own head. But what do you guys think? Do you think spicy content is actually bad for society? Personally, I don't. What I really think is harmful is social media and how it's being used. Not even like the internet as a whole, but specifically social media and the insane amount of power the people running it have to shape and program people on a massive scale. Would you want to live in a dystopian society where sensual expression is outlawed, or would you yourself become an outlaw in defiance of it?
That's why I was immediately attracted to you. I could tell you were an outlaw.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm kind of outlaw through and through, baby.
I fully understand and agree that those things are harmful, but let me give you an analogy real quick. Let's say that the people working in the industry are fish, living in the ocean. And let's say that the people that are in support of this new bill are just people talking to the fish. And so the person says to the fish, hey, did you know that there's pollutants and garbage in the ocean? And the fish says, yes, I live in the ocean. I'm very well aware of the garbage and pollutants that are in the ocean. We should do something about that. And the person says, I agree. I think we should get rid of the entire ocean. And the fish says, I don't think that's the best course of action. For example number one, I live in the ocean.